The January 22nd meeting, regular meeting of the Park Township Planning Commission is now in session. First item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. Does anybody have any changes or additions or changes they'd like to make? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion to accept as presented.
So moved.
Support. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Second item is the approval of the minutes from our December meeting. Does anybody have any corrections? I went through it and did not see it. But that doesn't mean there aren't.
Well, I can't let the opportunity go by.
No.
Did you find?
I found two. Well, one correction and one recommendation. How about that?
Okay.
Both on page 8. Second paragraph, it starts with bourbon. The third sentence, because there is limited housing availability in the area, potential employees are choosing to seek employment to reduce their commute. It should, we need the word elsewhere, seeking employment elsewhere to reduce the commute for clarity. The second item was under item 6, second paragraph, starting with Clark. I thought it should be important that we mention the name of our congressman that we're referring to. Just said they had breakfast with the congressman.
Congressman Bill Heisinger.
Yes.
Okay.
You should come home and run a gravel company.
Yes, please keep in mind we are in session.
Don't put that in minutes.
All right.
Oh, I hope, don't put that in.
It's there for in perpetuity now. Go ahead.
I have a couple of things as well.
Okay, bud.
On page 3, it's 1, 2, 3, 4th paragraph down where it starts with 1. Go down to the second line, and then it says there is a lone tree. I think it's more like a significant tree. Lone tree doesn't make sense. I may have said that, but anyway. And then the other part is on page 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 paragraph down where it starts with my name again. The thing that's not correct in there is I did not have a conversation with that Daniel Franco.
Okay.
I had a conversation with somebody that was on the planning commission, and they recommended that we can connect with them. I didn't want anybody to think that I had a conversation.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, any others? Okay, if not, like a motion to accept as amended?
So move.
Support. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we have a pretty full agenda tonight. We actually have on the agenda, after public comment, which we'll have in just a minute, 2 public hearings and discussion, further discussion around the amendments, and I would say the conversations we're having around trying to provide some improvements and some updates to the tree preservation ordinance. Right now, we'll go to public comment. We do have 2 public hearings, so if your comments are going to be specific to either the flood hazard ordinance updates or the C2 Resort District Service District and Parking Ordinance discussions, which will be part of a public hearing as well. Please hold those until the public hearing timeframe. If you have public comment about anything beyond those 2, now would be the time to make those comments. So do we have anybody on the left? Yes.
Hey, Jackie Beck. Just wanted to thank you guys for working on the tree preservation ordinance. I'm very happy to see that happening.
Thank you. We're excited about it as well. There's a lot going into it, so thanks for that. Anybody else on the left side?
Just here for the C2.
Okay, great. On the right side? Nope, no additional comments. With that, we'll go ahead and close the public comment. Right now, we'll open the public hearing around the flood hazard ordinance. Mika, do you want to make any initial comments and then we can open the public hearing?
Sure. This is, so you looked at this a couple of months ago. There were a couple additional changes that I pointed out since then. When I went through kind of in my final look through, I found a couple other spots that I thought, oh, there's actually, we have a couple different definitions there. There's a little bit of additional cleanup to do with that. And so the additional changes also include replacing language that was MDEQ with Eagle, some current standards and definitions. And then the one substantive change was something that I think has only come up once since I've been here. We currently in our ordinance, as it's written right now, talk about measuring from the flood hazard zone when it's on Lake Michigan. But we do have some flood hazard areas that are not on Lake Michigan, including one that's on a river or a drain. And so rather than just leaving that alone and saying, we're not going to measure from anything unless it's specific to Lake Michigan, I would propose saying if there's any flood hazard zones, and these are the 100-year floodplain that we would be measuring from, not like the 500-year. But if it's from the edge of those zones, that would be consistent and say that we would measure from that point. So that's the one substantive change. The rest is just cleanup.
A couple of things as I went through this. I'm sorry. But we're still in the public hearing period. So are there any comments around the floodplain ordinance? All right, I guess I have to did I already open the public hearing? I didn't. Okay. We need a motion to do that. Do I have a motion to open the public hearing? Support, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Public hearing on floodplain ordinance is now open. Do we have any comments from the attendees? Okay.
Support.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. One thing I want to just mention at this point, because we do have public hearings tonight, I want to just kind of lay out a couple of ground rules. One thing I need to provide in context, and this is regarding actually the second item on the agenda in terms of ex parte. We did get some feedback from a resident, and this is specific to the C2 and parking ordinance amendments. And I sent a note to them just thanking them because it was clear from the feedback and the input that we got that they had spent quite a bit of time going through what the proposed amendment was. And I responded back and thanked them for providing that because there was a lot of detail and I suspect there was a lot of time put into that. So there was no other communication besides that. I just wanted to make sure everybody understood that. Okay. A couple of ground rules in terms of speaking around the public hearing periods. This is the time that really for us to hear from our members of the public. We welcome your comments, which are very important to us. Please note that each speaker's comments are limited to 3 minutes. In order to be courteous and respectful to everyone in attendance, please remain quiet and do not engage in side conversations. I think we probably, good timing. I'm just going through some ground rules for public comment and public hearings. As a reminder, when you do come up to the podium to comment, remember to sign in and please give us your name when you start speaking. And please address your remarks to the chair. Note that at this point in time, this is your time to speak and to give us your input. We won't have dialogue with you. Please keep in mind that the meeting itself belongs to the Planning Commission and that while public input is very valuable, once we start the decision-making discussion after the public hearing is closed, then that will be the end of the point where public input is provided. If you do have factual questions, anything that we're not able to address or we don't address specifically, our staff will be happy to capture that and address those at a later date. Okay. So the public hearing for the flood hazard ordinance update is open. Comments? Sorry about that. There are none. Okay. We have a motion to open. Do we have a motion to close?
I think that the public hearing was open and closed for
It was
the,
open
for the
and
flood
closed.
hazard ordinance. Yes,
So,
yes, you're good.
okay. So discussion. I had just a couple of, I guess, questions on this based on information in here. And I was looking at the area that talked about the, specifically the certified floodplain assessment. Did those go into assessing the setbacks as well? Because I know they covered a lot of the things that are specific in engineering related to that.
Yeah, it didn't cover the setbacks. That's not something that is, like a federal requirement. And so that was what they were looking at, was making sure that we're in alignment with what FEMA requires.
Okay. The other thing I noticed was at the bottom of page 3, it talks about, in the event that Eagle would authorize a setback less than the distance required in Article 3, the requirements of Article 3 should be met. The way I'm reading that, I want to make sure I'm understanding it, is, in other words, the Park Township ordinance tied to the federal requirements would be senior to Eagle. Am I misunderstanding that?
It would be, if there were no Eagle requirements, then the Park Township ordinance would govern. Yeah.
Those are the main ones I had. Anybody else, feedback, comments, questions? There's a lot of detail in there.
I thought this was very helpful.
Yeah, I thought so as
But,
well.
yeah,
Yeah,
Little cheaters got it.
Yeah.
yeah.
yeah, I thought, you know,
Anytime we can get something like that to give us more background information, just like it's directly from the source.
Yes, it's
wonderful.
It's valuable.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking about that as I was looking at these. We look at flood maps all day long, but I thought you guys probably never even seen a flood map before. Be helpful to see what that looks like. You do.
Yeah, I think the categories of it and how it's all made, it's really helpful.
Good. Okay.
Any other discussion, questions, conversation? All right, so I think at this point, we're looking for approval of the ordinance change or the amendments. Okay,
Make a motion that we approve the changes to the ordinances as submitted.
I'll support.
okay. We have a motion and support. I'll go for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Amendment passes. Thanks for the work on this.
Yes.
Appreciate it.
And this is a recommendation to the board. These will go to the board as well, as you know.
That's,
What's
that's what
yeah. Awesome.
Okay. That takes us to our second public hearing, which is around my agenda, around the C2 Resort Service District and parking ordinance. We do have a public hearing for this, so we will need a motion to open the public hearing.
So move.
Okay, all in favor? Aye. All right, I don't think anybody's opposed. Mika, could you give us some context around this?
Yes. So as you know, we're doing quite a bit of cleanup. That's really one of the focus points that we have right now. And the C2 district is one of those areas to do some cleanup in. There were a couple of different things that are going on in the C2 district. One is that we started getting phone calls. I don't know why it's all of a sudden popped up this year, but we got a couple of phone calls this fall, not just for one property, but for a couple different properties that are located in both the C1 and C2 districts. We haven't gotten to C1 yet. But there were questions about if the existing single-family home, if the person wanted to remove it, could they do that? And then could they rebuild another single-family home on that parcel? Right now, our ordinance treats these existing single-family homes, and there are a number of them in both of the districts, as nonconformities. So as we've talked about in other contexts, a nonconformity means that you're allowed to keep it. It's allowed to be there. It existed before, either before the rule existed or before the rule changed. And so as long as you keep it in the same form that you had it, you can continue that use. But if you change it, you're not able to, you don't have the right to rebuild. So you can continue operating a grocery store if the zoning changes to residential. You're not able to double the size of the grocery store. And if you tear it down, then you're not able to rebuild another grocery store there. What you are able to do is if there is some kind of act of God, flood, tornado, you can rebuild it. By the strict letter of the ordinance, you've got to make it the same. So that can get a little tricky too. So you can keep exactly what you have. But if you want to make any changes, you can't do that. And so there were some questions with underwriting and with insurance with some of these houses in those areas. Kind of dovetailing with that, one of the recommendations that we hear sometimes from the housing advocates is to allow housing within these commercial zones, not to exclude housing from commercial zones. So right now, what you're allowed to do in our commercial districts are mixed use. So you can have both like an apartment with a shop attached to it or something along those lines. So you can have a housing unit, but it has to be in combination with like a retail establishment or something along those lines. So this expands that just a little bit. We also wanted to make sure that as we were looking at tightening up all the things around short-term rentals, that we weren't going to be missing anything. And so we just took a look at that just to put down some specifics where there weren't any. And that one specifically, we didn't have anything named a short-term rental within the parking ordinance. There is more work that could be done on the parking ordinance, but this specifically adds it. So I would look at it right now and say this is like a hotel or a motel, because I think that's probably the closest parallel that we have. But that's an interpretation. And so we don't really want to do these interpretations. We want the code to say exactly what we want it to say. So that was what was behind that. There were a couple other changes within the parking that I don't think were. Yeah, so there are a couple other changes as far as distance for a parking lot. And I think that we received an email, and that was on the dais as well, that kind of talked about parking was one of the things that it talked about that they had addressed. But one of the questions was whether it can go across a roadway. So for off-site parking, right now the ordinance says that it needs to be within 300 feet. That can be okay in a lot of cases. But we have had questions about, well, I want to have my business right here, and then I want to have parking on the opposite side of Ottawa Beach Road. And that seems like a really bad idea. So there are a lot of places where that could work, like lower volume roadways, quieter spots, not a problem. But wanted to have a place where we could at least take a look at that and say, is this going to create a safety hazard, or is this fine? And just we want to keep the flexibility, but just reduce the any safety concerns. I think those are the main things. There was a few other little cleanup pieces as well, and I'm sure that I missed a point or two. But I think that was the majority of it.
So do we have any data on, so we've got the boat launch.
Mm-hmm.
The parking for that is on the other side.
Right.
Of Ottawa Beach Road. Have we had any instances with safety concerns?
There are definitely safety concerns. I don't know. I mean, I could pull that crash map up and take a look and see if there's anything there, but no, I think that's a good question. And that is existing, so that wouldn't be affected by this because again, that would be an existing nonconformity if that were the case. And it's the state, so there's usually a little exclusion for those.
Great, thanks. Public hearing is open. Those on the left that would like to speak, it's like, yep, sure.
My name's Gordon Julius. I live at 697 Coolidge. It's on the other side. I built a house 5 years ago and had to go through the process of changing the zoning ordinance to make that happen. So that's the last time I've been here. I'd like to talk about chickens, cars in the parking lot, and kennels, but I'll save that for another day. I'm here to talk about parking. And I think as the way it was written before, And, you know, we haven't, the information has just come to us and we're trying to decipher that in process. By the way, I'm an architect. I don't know if I said that. So I have experience with planning and site planning, but I think the way the ordinance was written before was that you could have a car at a short-term unit for each bedroom. And I think the way it's being written right now is that you need a car for each bedroom plus an additional car for each 650 square feet. Now, let's do a little bit of math here. 900 square foot house, 2 100 square foot bedrooms, and plus 650 square feet. That's requiring 4 vehicles for a 900 square foot house with 2 bedrooms. That's 16 bodies, 4 in each car. Let's take it a little bit farther. And let's say it's a 3,000 square foot house. I go to Oak Island every year, just rented the place that we usually go. We go there, the in-laws go there, the kids go there, the grandkids go there, and we go there and rent 3,000 or 4,000 square feet with 2 cars in a driveway. Sounds reasonable to me. Okay, so 3,000 square feet. If you go by the ordinance and 2 or 3 bedrooms, you can make a calculation with the 600 square feet, 650 square feet to allow, to require or allow 8 cars in that space. That's a frat party. And I don't know what the intent is of the ordinance, but I think you're trying to restrict people throwing frat parties. And this allows parking, if you can get it in there, to have your own personal frat party. And I don't like that. Thank you.
Good evening. Jeremy Allen, live at 1380 South Shore Drive. I'm here because my wife and I just purchased 1504 South Shore Drive. Who remembers the old Amsterdam gift shop or the Crow's Cottage, right? Okay, before my time, right? But we bought Susan Lance, she's the mom of Dave Lance at Beechwood Church. Bought her house because it's 6 doors over from where we live. And it's about, it's over 3,000 square foot, but half of it was the old Amsterdam gift shop. Half was the Crow's Cottage when Susan owned it, which was an antique store. The other half she lived on. Well, it's zone C2, right? C2 allows for a lot of different uses, one being short-term rentals. With us living 6 doors over, when I found that out from Dave, I said, well, gosh, that's great because that's zoned. I mean, Park Township has made a big deal about saying this is where we want short-term rentals to be in the C2 zone district. So I said, great, we were a lot of those phone calls last fall trying to get clarity. Hey, the ordinance says you can have a short-term rental in C2. We would like to do that. So we made an offer, purchased it in November, hired an architect, got to working on plans so that we could have a short-term rental here inside this, the old Amsterdam gift shop, the old Crow's Cottage, which we found boxes from the Amsterdam gift shop tucked up in the rafters somewhere. So we're going to save some of those and some old pictures. But to his point, all of a sudden, I get a letter January 12th or 13th, just a week or so ago, dated December 31st. I don't know why it took so long to get to me, saying that, hey, there were a whole lot of changes recommended. coming down, and that's you guys have all these changes. Many of which directly impact this project, this property. Now, I'm not sure. I've tried to seek time with Mika, Bill, just to try and get clarity. So this is I'm here tonight to listen to and understand. I mean, as Mika just said, there's a lot of details in here. One of them on their face looks like if we have 5 bedrooms, and we have kitchen and great room and dining room and a kid's playroom. We're going to need like 8 or 9 parking spots, which is completely out of character for our neighborhood. I live 6 doors over. There's a bed and breakfast that Betsy owned right next door to us. I mean, they probably have 4 or 5 parking spots. But I want to bring that up that to his point, putting in 8 or 9 parking spots looks like it's inviting room for frat parties. And that's the last thing we want to do. We just hosted a family that moved from Phoenix, and it was a pastor, his wife, and 2 kids coming to take over a church in Zeeland. They did not have, 7 or 8 cars. So I bring that up to ask, like, I'm not sure why the parking requirement would be so great. And another question would be, how many properties does this really impact? I haven't been able to get that clarity from Mika or Mr. Cousins, but I don't think it impacts many. I think that this directly impacts my property and my project. So I don't know that it's retaliatory, but it sure feels like, and I haven't, I've been able to sit down and really dive into this, but it feels like I made the purchase and here are the zoning ordinance changes. I do want to bring up to the Planning Commission, whether you choose to vote on this tonight or not, that as soon as we got this letter, January 12th or 13th, came into the office to ask for a copy because they weren't online and were told that they were still on Mika's desk, that they were not published yet. And so these were emailed to our architect, Gordon, after 5 o'clock on January 13th. And these have not been available to the public for very long for us to digest and really look through. So on its face, I am excited to see things continue to tighten up and have clarity, because I think that's one of the big problems we've had around the short-term rental conversation the last few years is the ordinance were not very clear. And I applaud the staff and you guys and the Board of Trustees for trying to make that crystal clear, which is why we bought this property in C2. It was crystal clear. It said short-term rentals were allowed. Now there is almost 9 pages by the time we redline it of ways that it's changing right after I purchased a property to make it a short-term rental in the C2 district. So I thank you for working on it. I'm here to listen and hopefully learn a lot. And I'd encourage you, maybe you could kick this 1 month and allow a little bit more time for us to be able to meet with Mika, to be able to dig into this and understand how this is going to impact our project or not. Thank you.
Jackie back, so 334 Drive. So I have a slightly different thought on this. If you look at C2 Resort Service District, it says the C2 Resort Service District is for commercial uses that primarily serve tourists and seasonal residents. The areas of the township is on C2 are extremely small. And while I do like mixed use and would like to see that expanded to residential zone districts, I don't think we should be reducing the space available for commercial uses in the township by allowing mixed use residential in C2. That's going to take away from the already extremely limited areas where commercial services can be provided. There's already almost nowhere in the township where commercial uses are allowed. And residents have to leave the township for almost all of their needs, except for, going to the beach, which is awesome. So I'm suggesting that the new proposed line 17 and 18 should be eliminated. And then the amended line 29, to me, that's unclear and confusing. It states that all short-term rental operations shall comply at all times with all requirements and other provisions of Chapter 8 pertaining to short-term rental establishments as amended. That's the bed and breakfast chapter. And short-term rentals are not bed and breakfasts. So if redundancy is desired, which is probably a good idea, I recommend saying instead that all short-term rental operations shall comply with Section 8-15, short-term rental registration, since that is the only provision of Chapter 8 that appears to pertain to short-term rentals. And joining in the parking thought, The recommended one space per bedroom plus one space per 650 square foot. It's unnecessarily confusing, and like they've been saying, it adds to the number of cars that'll be there. I recommend eliminating the parking requirement, simplifying it by just requiring one space per bedroom and leaving it at that. That's how it is for bed and breakfast. Thanks.
That's over here. With that, motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Sure. In favor?
I,
Opposed? Mika, I think there's a couple of questions that, as we were working at this, came to light, and I think the parking piece came up. I'd like to, since it refers back to the original ordinance as well as the amendment, can you kind of speak to the thought around parking piece?
Yeah, anything in particular, the parking piece as far as the
Well, I think the
The
numbers, yeah.
numbers specifically on the square footage? Yeah, let me see if I can get it in front of me so I can be looking at it. Oh, no, I'm still in the. Yeah, there we go. We know that short-term rentals require more parking than single-family homes, and so that's kind of where this came from. I was not able to find, and maybe they're out there, but I wasn't really able to find a lot of good comps as far as this went. This is still emerging in a lot of municipalities. So as far as saying this is what's required, and of course, in some areas, I was talking to somebody earlier that said they went to a short-term rental in Boston, and obviously you don't need any for a place like that. So this is intended to address what we tend to see at a lot of these short-term rentals where you have, the parking spots filled in the driveway and then across the bike path and then down the street and then down the street the other direction. And so that's the intent. I think it's a fair question to ask, what do we want to see in an area that's supposed to, as far as appearance goes, what do we want to see with how that looks? And then what is required? So, sometimes you'll be going to a short-term rental as a family or a couple family units. You might have 4 cars for 20 people. Other times you are going to something that's more like a bachelorette party, and then you're going to have 15 cars for 15 people or something along those lines. So we're not going to hit that perfectly. I have no qualms about adjusting this. If it seems like it's too many, then by all means, let's drop that number. But that was the thinking that was behind it. And the reason for not just going per bedroom is that I think we all know that sleeping does not just happen in bedrooms or short-term rentals. Whether it's supposed to or not supposed to, it doesn't. So just acknowledging that a lot of times these structures hold a lot more people than you would see in a single family home.
I think you addressed one of the other questions that came up, which is water.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you mentioned originally that this is, and I think it was referenced as well, that there's not a lot of C2 resort service areas, and there are not, and I don't believe, a lot of short-term rentals in those areas today. So with the expectation that there would be more in the future, and you mentioned at the beginning that you've gotten questions from I'm sorry, I didn't turn my mic back on there. Apologize. That you had gotten questions from developers, from purchasers, folks that are interested in purchasing property and potentially moving those into a short-term rental. And there are just a lot of things that didn't seem like they were in place to be able to support that. I think that was, I just wanted to kind of recap your comments.
Yeah, that's really what it was. And so we've been, there are a whole lot of things that we'd like to address looking at short-term rentals just in general. We obviously have enforcement that we're working on that's ongoing. And then we have a lot of areas of the ordinance that we think need to be updated. So we've been kind of working through that. There's some of the registration stuff that we want to get to be a little bit tighter. There are existing short-term rentals or similar within these C2 districts, and we just want to make sure that everything that we have is very straightforward and internally coherent, and that it agrees with each other. So we're just working to do that as much as we can. So, yeah, and the cleanup that we've talked about, some of it too is just as it comes. So, you know, you'll probably see signs pop up at one of these points. That's been on the short list for a couple of years. And, you know, as we're looking at the floodplain. So some of it's just, okay, what's on the list? And we don't have any site plan reviews right now. If we hadn't had site plan reviews in the past several months, this probably would have been earlier, but here it is.
I guess one other thing I would just ask in terms, because this comes up periodically when we have amendments to an existing ordinance around what the lead time of the communications process is for that. Can you just speak to how we communicate out when we have a public hearing coming out on an ordinance or amendments?
Sure. So we follow the process. It's required by the legislation. For ordinances, our ordinance doesn't require anything beyond the legislation. And so we do the public noticing in the newspaper and then the mailing within 300 feet. And that goes out a couple of weeks before an ordinance is considered. So that's how that goes there. Everything is posted on the website. Typically a week before the meeting, and it is available in the office. This past time, I actually did see a plan land on my desk right about the same time that notice date came out. Pulled it back to make a change, and then so it was away from the desk for about 3 hours. So 5:06 p.m. is when that communication went out after 5, but it is available at the desk for inspection. When that happens as well. And by email, you can always email me and I'll send it over.
2 readings. 2 public notices. Excuse me, 2 public notices.
There's public hearing is closed at this point, but I think you spoke to for public, if we have any type of an amendment that's going to involve a public hearing, there's a standard process that we need to follow. And that was what Mika just described.
Chair, you mentioned, and this is just a general comment, not many short-term rentals in C2, but my last count, I believe, was 32 of them.
Okay.
So that is substantial in my opinion.
Good. Excellent. Thanks for the update. I appreciate that. You probably see a lot more of the conversation around. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. All right. I've got a few comments, but I'm going to open it up at this point to the Planning Commission and comments. There's a lot of information here. I think Mika's done a nice job in laying out some proposed modifications for us, and I'll open it up to the group, see if there's any initial thoughts or comments.
I'll agree with our speakers, every one of them tonight, that maybe we may be allowing too many vehicles to be on site, and smaller is probably better than larger as far as amounts go. I think it's going to be very seldom. And again, nobody has a crystal ball and nobody can project what other people are going to do on vacation. But to have one person per vehicle show up in a large facility, I don't know if that will happen or not. But I think if they're told they can only have so many, they'll listen. Carpool.
I'll chime in where we're starting. Personally, I thought it may be more logical to have 1 space per bedroom plus 1. Just simplify it there. It's just number of bedrooms plus 1. Because I do agree, in the short-term rental spaces, right, there are often 1, if not more, additional spaces where someone may be sleeping, like a pull-out on the living room, whatever. But per additional 650 square feet, thinking about the areas where we do have the C2 resort district, there's not space. And I just don't think it makes sense. So I flagged that one, and I thought plus 1 and just capping it at number of bedrooms plus 1 seemed more in line with my way of thinking and observing our neighborhoods.
Thanks.
I don't agree with that. I'm not sure about the plus 1. We rented a lot of Airbnbs and all of them, and if I just go by bedrooms, I mean that, and the many places we go, there with a 4-bedroom, we tend to do 4 bedrooms. There are not spots for 4 parking in those spots. So even the plus 1 sounds pretty generous to me. And if there's a sofa or something, That's usually somebody that's in a car with somebody else, so, so I like the bedrooms, I don't know if the plus one is necessary.
The way I thought about it, right, is one, it's not, you're not every single visitor is going to come individually. And I think it's still for the space in the community, having seen short-term rentals uncontrolled, having the spaces dedicated for those that are in the resort district and having that space so they're not parking in places that they shouldn't be is still important. At least they're still allowing some flexibility to have more variation in that location rather than having them do what they want and park elsewhere without accommodation. At least giving the opportunity, right, to have it still contained within that location.
Question, Mika, how do we specify maximum number of guests in a short-term rental, or do we?
That would be if we decide to implement licensing, which is something that we would likely do, that would be in that section. So we would say, you can have that, because that's a little outside of the land use itself. So the zoning is really focusing on the land use.
So if we have a registration, every particular structure will get a determination of maximum number of guests.
That it's unwritten, but that could be included there. Yes,
Understand.
yes.
I'm just
Hypothetically, yes.
I'm trying to tie parking needs to people,
Right.
how many parking spaces per maximum amount of residents
Sure.
would that require? Because we don't want too little parking, or else then it spreads every place but on the short-term rental. But we don't want to force short-term rentals to put in 7 or 8 parking spaces because it's a larger house. I'm not sure where to land on this, but I think it's tied to what's the maximum number of residents allowed.
Right. And so, and that's, and so that's not established. I mean, that's not established right now. So, in these larger houses, you do see 7 or 8, cars staying there, not uncommonly. I've got pictures.
I don't need pictures. I was next door to one that had 12.
Yeah.
And there were extra cars beyond that.
Yeah.
Yeah, when I went through the ordinance, that's the one thing that hit me is the extra per 650 square feet. I would be in agreement with Commissioner Chawla that bedrooms plus 1 seems reasonable without anything established right now that says number of occupants. It might require a revision if we go to that. So I would support that, and got a couple other comments on other things like the one right below it. For bowling alleys, which we don't have in Park Township, but 8 parking places per alley. I mean,
We can amend that while we're at it.
per lane, and anybody that's going to be a spectator isn't going there just to watch. They're going there with somebody else. That would probably be another vehicle, but
I can change that route right now. I'm happy to do that.
but it's like 8. Really.
Or for bowling alley? What was that? Is that where we're at? All right.
4? I like 4.
But then if somebody wants a bowling alley, then.
And then on the next page, I just need a little clarification on this one. You go most of the way down, item number 1, under requirements for parking. No part of any public or private parking area, regardless of number of spaces provided, shall be closer than 10 feet to the street right-of-way line or private road easement. So I thought right away about itty bitty. the parking goes right up to the road.
Yeah,
And Rendezvous Restaurant or whatever it is called these days out by the beach. I've seen cars in the end parking place hanging over the bike path and stuff like that. So those would be
so.
non-compliant. I mean, would they be?
Yeah, so two parts of that. One is that this isn't actually new. That was the final clause under what's now number 2. And I pulled it out of there because we've run into an issue. There are statutory rules of interpretation for when you're interpreting these ordinances, and it's very outline based. So if you say X on this line, you can't say not X down here. And so the top line says this is for parking lots 10 and above. And then underneath that, it said regardless of size. And so that's just moving that outside of that no to yes. So it's not something new. It's just a fix. But yeah, so those parking lots are all non-conforming. And some of them I think work better than others. So as long as you're kind of keeping the same what you have, you can continue to keep doing that. If you decide to make a lot of changes, then you either need to look at it at variance. Typically you need to look at a variance or you need to look at a different design. So those two examples you gave in particular are really tricky because you're right. Like, I mean, the one down by the old Idaho Beach Inn, that is it's right up against the bike path. The one over at Itty Bitty, I'm always afraid somebody's just gonna step into the street, but it's been there for, however long. So yeah, those would be existing nonconformities.
Okay. So there's nothing we can do about that, right?
No, nah, no. Yeah.
That's my ground back. Yeah.
Yeah, and we've got this in front of us. So if you think that 10 feet is too much or you don't want to see that, I'd recommend something. But if that seems
fine if they comply with the 10 feet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just whether we're
Yeah,
spacing.
those two, it's like they're just hazards.
Yeah, yeah. And so if they make a change, like if there's a change of use or something like that, then they would come to Planning Commission for review. And for that, it would have to go to the ZBA.
Whatever it was before the Rendezvous, they made some changes. They remodeled the whole thing and ate up some of their restaurant space. So expanded that area out, which ate into their parking.
That didn't cross my desk, so I don't know if that was before or after I was here, but
It was a while back.
Yeah, I think that it was right, maybe.
Months ago.
Yeah, I want to say it was right around when it had started, and I didn't know if it had actually been reviewed or if it just kind of happened.
Yeah, it just seemed like something should have been addressed with that
at the time. Yeah, I would agree.
Can't go back now, right?
Right. They don't like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, that's it.
I had one, and it was actually regarding the end of the narrative here, which talked about amending section 38-603 to allow the planning commission to waive on-site parking where on-street parking is available. And then the second bullet, which is providing details. And then I guess the conclusion is the planning commission may request changes. I'm sorry, that's on staff. My biggest concern here is that it seems like the way this is written, or at least your comments, the way you're thinking about this, the PC would own the evaluation as to whether or not there's sufficient parking, sufficient on-site or, yeah. And it seems to me that and some of the safety requirements would have to involve OCRC and maybe the sheriff's department.
And I would say that would be part of your evaluation. So it's similar to when we're going through a development, you say, I want to know what the engineer has to say about this. We need to get a hydrologist. We need to, whatever that happens to be, whatever information it is that you think you need in order to make that decision, then you would be able to check for that. Yeah.
I just wanted it seemed like that was an awful lot to put on us, and I don't think we have all of that. Yeah, all of that.
No.
The guardrails, I think, are a little tighter than what we have.
It gives that little bit of flexibility. What I was actually thinking about was the Iowa Beach General Store when that was rebuilt. We had to put those parking spots in, and I always kind of looked at that and thought, down there, most people are kind of walking there. You need to have something probably, handicap spot, but it would have been an interesting thing to be able to at least discuss that. So.
Agreed. I think just thinking about the 10 feet as well. What we're really looking at is future developments, future parking.
Yeah.
Recognizing that the non-conforms unless something changes there, they're gonna remain as non-conforming.
Mhm.
I think there's probably on the south side, a large commercial entity that probably has parking that's pretty close to the street as well, probably 10 feet, right?
Right,
Just thinking about the marina.
right,
Yeah.
right.
So again, those are just accepted and would continue as non-conforming.
They would, and you know, one of the other things that I've thought of is some of the parking spots that just, and this might be what you had in mind, but they are really kind of like, not parallel parking spots, perpendicular parking spots, you know, the pull off, yes, thank you, the angle parking, that are along those lines. So that might be something to add right here, you know, that angle parking may be permitted by the planning commission. Wouldn't be treated the same way as a parking lot. It'd have to be approved by the road commission also, which would.
Mr. Chair, I have two items that I certainly ask questions on. One is just a detail on page 5 of the ordinance with the red top of the page. Number 4. Those two, the first sentence and the second sentence seem to be saying the same thing in a different way. And I almost wondered if the red was supposed to be replacing this sentence before it. And one says may require and one says shall require, and they're battling each other.
I had that one too, yeah.
Give me just 1 second to get to there in the ordinance, because I think that that's a typo. I was looking at that just before the meeting, and I think it might be a typo.
Number 4 on page 5.
Yeah.
Talks about,
Screening and buffering.
Yes, that is a typo. So I was working from 2 draft documents. And the part that is, so these numbers along the side are actually line numbers. I added that this time to see if that was something that would be helpful. Line number 2, where it says or parcel but is in residential use, that's not currently in the ordinance. So that is a typo that shouldn't be there. The red below rephrased that in a way that, at least when I was drafting it, I thought was more clear. So, yeah, so or parcel that is in residential use.
So it wasn't intended to go along with it. It was intended to replace the prior sentence.
Sorry, say that again.
Yeah, I read it the same way, because one is shall be screened and then the other was may, or may require. And it sounds like if it.
Oh, I see. So, okay, the difference between those 2 clauses is the first one is side yards and rear yards adjoining any lot in a residential or agricultural zoning district. So that's solely based on zoning. You also have use, and you know, you can discuss this, whether this is a good idea or not, because uses can change over time. So this would only be if you have so we have these nonconformities. If you have a residential use that's next to a commercial site, even if it's on a commercial parcel, you could say, you know, there should really be some fencing there in order to get that privacy. But that's why it says may as opposed to shall, because I don't even know how frequently that would come up. But knowing that we've been talking about nonconformities, that's where that thought came from.
Yeah, I guess we can take a look at that. It seems like we might be able to combine those. I know one is zoning based and the other is use based. But maybe it's just a clarifying.
I have a question on verbiage. And as we look back in time, the term short-term rental was never used because it had not been invented yet. And I know we don't know foreseeing what may come some other day in some other words invented that would compromise or contradict something within our ordinance, but I'm just wondering if we don't stay consistent with old verbiage and adding in new words and any potential. I don't have something to pull out of my head right at this moment, but we've got hotel, motel, resorts, and short-term rentals. I'm just now seeing that verbiage. Should we keep the verbiage we've been using or add short-term rentals or add that and something else that says, or anything that may come from in the future that represents this? I know that's wording, probably not appropriate, but I just think.
It would make it more interesting to read.
Yeah.
I mean, hotel, motel, resort, we have things, I don't know how many we have in any of those categories, but we've got at least a couple of things that are kind of older and are more or less in those categories yet. So I would think that we would want to keep those. Are you thinking that we want to kind of reevaluate those definitions as well, or add something more along the lines of just like, I'm trying to think of what similar use would be. I'm kind of feeling like if you had a similar use.
No, I think leave the words and add maybe similar use could be added to that, but that could be up for interpretation. I mean,
Right.
hammock hanging from a tree. We've seen that. Just the general.
Mm-hmm. I'm pondering it. It kind of is, it's a transient uses. It's like similar transient uses.
Mr. Chairman, I kind of like the use of short-term rentals in C2. I can think of all these questions that we get. I feel a lot more comfortable saying, yeah, we have short-term rentals, but they're specifically for C2. So
Yeah, I
I
don't
like
disagree
kind
with
of
that
the
at all.
acknowledgement that it's there.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that at all. I just would hope something else would be added to it for future inventions.
Hasn't been invented yet.
You are correct.
Well, I'll just say, from my perspective, given everything that has gone on in Park Township around short-term rentals, the fact that this is a permitted use in C2 and it is a short-term rental, I think we should keep the name short-term rental. I think it defines something that has a physical structure, has a roof, typically, I would think. And I think it defines where they are an acceptable use. So I'll just leave it there. That shouldn't stop the conversation. I just wanted to make that comment.
Mr. Chair, I have one more point of confusion for myself that I wanted to, I guess I'm asking Mika. When I read the floodplain ordinance, this went off in my head, and then here, if the same thought, confusion came in the C2 ordinance, and that is like the instigation for this have been realtors, insurance agents, underwriters discussing removing and rebuilding a residential structure, and then in the paragraph above you say we allow nonconformities as temporary uses, but to rebuild a residential structure, it has to match it, that you can't approve a different type of nonconformity.
Mm-hmm.
Is not lot size a nonconformity? I had the same question here, mainly because of my finding out that I live on a non-conforming lot size. I didn't know. So is lot size a nonconformity as you refer to it in that existing nonconformities paragraph?
It is a nonconformity. And so some non-conforming lots, so typically, we typically allow people to build on a non-conforming lot as long as all the other requirements are met. Mainly because if we don't, then we're becoming subject to takings claims. Where the conformity comes in for lots is typically when we're creating new lots. So if somebody wants to do a land division, it's usually where it comes up. I'm not sure if it's ever come up anywhere other than a land division. We evaluate that for parcel size. We say, you know, if it's created and it's new, then it has to be conforming. So if it's a parcel and it's existing, you know, that parcel already exists. And so we allow the parcel and we allow the use on the parcel, whatever that use may be. Now, I want to say I talked to Dan about that just recently, because we were also talking about some setbacks and things like that. But that's typically what we'll do, you know, allow that use of the non-conforming.
Even a tear down and a rebuild, you
Right.
allow on a lot that is not the minimum size in that zoning.
Yes,
calculation.
yeah, because the lot is an existing, you know, the lot is, I could take your house away. Yeah, because the lot's an existing nonconformity, and then so you have the lot kind of by itself, and then you have whatever is sitting on the lot. So whatever's sitting on the lot, sometimes you still has to meet setback and requirements and things like that. Those are some of the things that the ZBA not infrequently sees where you have a nonconforming parcel, and so it's smaller than the setbacks that were designed for a larger parcel, and so that's one of the areas where that tends to come up. So.
Because in C2 right now, tell me if I'm wrong, in C2 right now, the minimum lot size for residential is a half an acre.
The minimum lot size is a half an acre. And that's, I wasn't able to get as deep into some of that as I had wanted to, but it's quite large.
Yeah.
We don't have many conforming parcels and I don't know how that came to pass. We could cut it in half if you want. I mean, we could do that tonight.
Okay, that's helpful.
Okay.
Kind of jumping around here, but there's a lot in here.
There's.
And we're kind of bouncing from parking to the square footage and resort piece, but I don't think this is completely off the base question, but around the kitchen regulations piece, I was looking at this and trying to understand the difference between hotel, motel, resort unit and the size of the property, the size of the space, 250 square feet, 500 square feet or greater. And what's allowed, is that a code element? This isn't right at the end, it's on page 6 in the middle of the ordinance proposed amendments.
I don't believe it's a code requirement. No, and definitely not like per square feet of lot size. I would suspect that that's been around for quite some time. So when I've talked to the building official about, you know, we've talked about tiny houses and things along those lines as well. How small can you actually build something? He's like, around 400 square feet. Maybe if you're really smart about it, you can get down to, you know, 360, something like that. You have minimum sizes for things like bedrooms and bathrooms, or maybe not a minimum size for a bathroom, but a minimum size, you need to have a certain amount of space in front of the toilet, and you need to have room for door swings. So I don't know where this came from. I don't think it's based on code, but it could be in some kind of approximating way to say this is how much space you need to fit these things.
I guess I was correlating this with my, you know, experiences just staying when I was traveling for work in hotels, and smaller rooms typically, even if they don't have a kitchen sink or stove, might have a utility sink in there, right? Something like that. So I don't know if that falls into that 250 to 500.
Yeah,
I don't know if it's, again, part of it's probably, I wouldn't say it's arbitrary, because I'm sure that the things like space in a bathroom and access to different parts of the property itself or that unit is part of what goes into that.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah, and it looks like that section right here, it doesn't go, kind of play by play for each line, but within section 38,456, it's part of the original 74 ordinance. And then it looks like there was an update in 2003. So I would suspect that amenities in hotels have changed in the past 23 years. I'm sure some of you can tell me if that's the case. And so, maybe that's something that we don't need anymore. Maybe that's not something we need included. I don't know. They can strike it.
Since Holland Township has a lot of hotels, it would be interesting to see with all the new builds, what the square footage of those rooms are, whether they have kitchens and
Mhm.
kitchenettes or whatever. It's for comparison.
there's a lot here, but are there any other thoughts that folks have? I think what we're getting to, as opposed to recommending approval or denial, is requesting some additional changes.
Yeah.
Not stepping out here.
Very normal.
It
Yep.
seems like a reasonable approach. But I don't want to shut off the conversation if there's more than anybody wants to bring up that wants to be addressed in this as well. I think what I've got so far is parking spaces, number of parking spaces. We've talked a lot about non-conforming space, and I think the 10 feet is probably okay, because it's not going to, it's really addressing new developments or new parking. But it really isn't going to impact existing non-conforming parking. I think it would be useful to take a look at the motel, hotel, STR, and some of the alignments between square footage, some of the things that were part of that. Maybe there's a way to clean that up, but
Oh, that's what you were referring to before. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Wanted to make sure I understood what you were getting at.
Let's see, what else did I tried to write quickly here on other things that we wanted to maybe.
I think you did a good job.
Anything else?
I was just taking notes throughout similar transient uses. I think that's most what I had.
Did we want to try to combine, on page 5, that section 4 on the screening? We had a little bit of discussion. Did we want to take action and try to combine the zoning and, use, or?
I'd like to see if we could clean that up. Whether it's understanding one is zoning based and the other is use based, maybe there's a way we can clarify that.
What are your just general thoughts on it? Because I really went back and forth. I really went back and forth on that. I tend to prefer just kind of going straight, zoning district. But when you've got kind of jumping back and forth in some areas between different kinds of uses, I get a little, there's still somebody that lives there. So,
yeah,
thoughts on either, both. Maybe I can just hear a few more thoughts on that as far as putting that together goes.
This is section 4 at the top of page 5.
So this is to protect usage changes, given that zoning is fixed. Is that really the instance that we're trying to cover?
I'd say so. So if you have a new use within this, because that's when it would come across if there's a site plan review.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's going to come before, I'm looking, if it's a change in use, it's going to come before us, right? It'll come before you.
Yeah, but I think the way that it's written is, yes, I think that that's correct. It's typically going to come to the planning commission.
Which is our chance to say whether we think there needs to be a buffer or not, or have that discussion. And
Right.
does the process allow the discussion of whether a buffer is needed or not?
Yeah, so you could also put it in, if it's more of a discretionary item, then we want to write some standards in to say, this is kind of what you're looking at. So Yeah, does that make sense? So if it's a discretionary item rather than a shall item, so saying, so if you wanted to just be able to evaluate it kind of on a case by case basis when it came before the planning commission,
That's what I'm thinking.
that would be your leaning.
Because you'd have to try to cover any possible circumstances in an ordinance, which
Sure.
is impossible.
Okay, I think I gotcha.
Any other input on that? That's kind of where I was coming out as well, so.
So just confirming the ask is to basically go with the section in red and then add some additional standards? Or do they go here? Where do those standards go that we use to evaluate?
It would go right here. So I don't know where an example is, but as you've got the 4 and then it would be following standards ABC, something along
Okay.
those lines. Yeah,
Yep, okay, I'm aligned.
that makes sense.
All right. Any other input, feedback, any other things we want to have considered as part of the updates to the event?
Parking, you guys talked about, I had that down. And what I was hearing you move towards, maybe I'll have you articulate it.
Well, I think
I think I know what you're saying, but I want you to say it.
I think we landed between 1 per bedroom or 1 per bedroom plus 1.
Plus one.
All right. I'll write it as +1 and then you guys can talk about it again next time and decide how you like that. Okay.
For bowling alley.
And 4 for bowling alley, thank you. Now, we're gonna come back next time and you're gonna have a lot more of those, aren't you?
Piece of property. I don't think we have anything that would be developable into a bowling
Right.
alley, but
How about a
who
sanitarium?
knows? Very good. So I think
I have, just a minute,
Go ahead, Dan, sorry.
because I want to make sure I understand. What is a parking place?
I'm gonna double check to see if we have if it's defined, but it's 9 by 20. It's a 9 by 20
So
spot.
is a driveway that holds 4 cars, 4 parking places?
Yes, assuming it meets those dimensional requirements.
And it's not gravel or grass.
That's at your discretion. Yeah, I mean, so that was one of those questions is, do you want to say, right, where I had that, that addition for for 9 cars and under, if you want to add that it needs to be, like a hard surface of some kind as opposed to grass,
Seen that too many times.
right?
I think it was terminology. Basically, it was concrete or gravel type of. It was either impermeable, or I guess you'd call it semi-permeable.
Yeah, like pervious,
But not.
I'm talking about those lattice things and, yeah.
Okay.
I was trying to be as all inclusive as I could with not a mud pit without saying
Right.
not a mud pit in the,
Right.
yeah.
Some form of improved surface.
Good point. Good question. I knew there was a dimension and I believe it has to, it's commercial. Does it need to be marked? I guess was the other question.
I would say not necessarily. I think it should be clear what it is, but it wouldn't necessarily have to be marked. I mean, that is kind of the question is, when you start talking about commercial requirements, that can open a lot more cans of worms than I think we've been discussing. So I would kind of lean towards not, maybe requiring it on the site plan, but not requiring it on the site.
We can talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I think we should.
All right. Looking back and forth, I don't think I see any additional comments or questions. I think at this point, I don't think we need to take a vote. I think we're just requesting some additional amendment or changes to the proposed amendments.
Yep,
Okay.
yep. And I think that's all of them.
Is it a tabling or is it a?
We could, I don't know if we typically do that, but it wouldn't hurt anything to table it.
Okay. Well, that would require correct?
Yes.
Okay, I think where we are at this point is we're recommending that we table this for some additional changes. If you're in agreement, do I have a motion?
So move.
Support.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thanks, Mika. Appreciate all the work.
Yeah, thank you, guys.
Great. It's a lot and it covers a lot of ground. So, and thanks to the commission for the good discussion on it. And thank you for your.
For the public's
input.
comment.
Appreciate it.
Yes, thank you.
All right, we are,
Could I ask one?
certainly. Yeah, we're, yeah, go ahead.
I'm just asking about the process.
Mhm.
And if you're tabling it, does that mean there's going to be no public hearing?
This was the public hearing, but
Making changes to this?
the modifications would still be put out on the website as everything is that we cover during our regular meetings. So any of the content, what's that?
No future public hearing.
There is public comment during our meetings.
There's always public comment.
Right to bring, anybody has a right to bring up whatever they choose.
Right.
Oh, is this public comment?
Well, yeah, maybe, but public comment, we have at all meetings. For specific things like amendments to ordinances or changes, we have a public hearing as well. That's what Mika mentioned up front is noticed out to folks within 300 feet, I believe it is. So you get that communication directly if you're in the area, if you live in the area.
Very often I've seen two public hearings and I'm hearing that you just have one public hearing and we're not going to have another public hearing for this topic.
I believe that's
correct.
Yeah, that's typically the way it's been done here. We will have a public comment. You certainly have the opportunity to provide additional input.
Great, thank you.
And thank you. Yeah, it'll absolutely be on the agenda, so you'll know. Yeah.
Okay, thank you guys.
All right, thanks.
Thank you.
You bet. Stay warm. Yes, most importantly. All right. Trees. Was anybody, I mean, we've been in an hour and 20 minutes or so. Does anybody need a quick break? If not, we'll keep on ahead.
I'm good.
Okay. All right, let's rock and roll. Mika's provided some additional input, a lot of additional information on the tree ordinance. I'll just make a couple of comments as well up front. We had what I thought, and Mika references it in here. We had a great discussion. Oh, yeah, excuse me, we're back, gentlemen. We're back in session. If you could take the conversation outside, I'd appreciate it. Thank you. Thanks. We had been a lot of great conversation. We had, bless you. Mika referenced it in her notes, but we had a really interesting conversation and kind of thought this would be a good way to go at it since we're having such discussion and deliberation around what this preservation ordinance should evolve into over time. And we had the opportunity to have our two main developers in town and a number of folks from the organizations come in. And Dan, Mika and I met with them and really made it we had a few specific bullets we wanted to get their input on, but it became a really productive conversation. And a lot of the notes from that are in here, but I think they provided us some good context on what works well for them, what creates some challenges for them, what they've seen in other townships and other cities that make the process more predictable. And I think it was very helpful in terms of where we're headed. So I'm just going to hand off Mika to you to provide a little bit more context. We've got some great notes here as well. So
Yeah, there were quite a few interesting things at that meeting, including some of the stuff that they weren't really interested in. There was a example I found, I think it was in one of the Carolinas, where there is an incentive. You could kind of get smaller lot sizes if you did certain things with trees and whatnot. And I thought that could be interesting, but they just thought it would be confusing. So it's like, okay, fantastic. That makes things easier. So that was really helpful to know, because I thought I didn't even know if that would be a good option for us, but it was helpful just to hear some of that, like what we shouldn't even be trying to figure out because nobody really wants to go through the confusion. One of the areas that we talked a lot about was buffers, and I think that that's a great one for the Planning Commission to talk about. I would say that the general sense was that they're struggling with the prescriptiveness sometimes of the buffer, specifically given some of the drainage requirements. And the drainage requirements are something that I still need to spend some time on. We need to put together a meeting for that. So I'm hoping by the next meeting that we'll be able to get into that piece a little more because that's bigger. Wouldn't necessarily say that personally I'm in agreement with just eliminating the buffers, but I do think that's a good thing to talk about. One of the things that we did talk quite a bit about are what a lot of places will call a tree save area. And it's similar to a buffer and then it's a defined area, but it can be anywhere on the property. And so looking to preserve clusters of trees as opposed to saying it has to be along the side. So I thought that was an interesting thought, and I'd really like to hear your thoughts on that. And maybe there are a few other things that we discussed. Maybe I'll kind of leave it there just for general conversation on that question of flexibility within buffers versus tree save areas, and if you have kind of general thoughts on that. And Dan was at that meeting as well, so if there's anything else that he wanted to add on that, love to hear that too.
That wouldn't be a one or the other, it would be, I would like to see that combined.
Yeah, I mean, and that's up to you. I think that's part of the conversation. One of the challenges, I would say it would be helpful, I think, to see some flexibility in the look at the buffer. I like them in a lot of instances. In some instances, they get really tricky to figure out when you have the drainage. And so, I'd just like to hear a little bit, some more of your thoughts on that. But it's up to you how you want to approach that, what direction you want to go.
I really like the idea of the tree save, and I don't remember the development of the south side where they did a tree inventory. And literally there were some really amazing trees that were not in the buffer. And I was really disappointed to see some of those trees go. So I think the tree saved area I really like that because we are going to find those significant trees that really, and even the notes in here, it adds value to the property and the homeowners and everything. So I like the concept of the saving. And then, and how is that used in conjunction with the buffer? So like, do you start with the tree save, and then, I mean, they have to work together, so you do this. If this is not true, then maybe you go to the buffer, so I don't know how you do that.
Yeah, I want to clarify something in just a second, but I think that's what I'd love to hear when you think about those trade-offs. How would you imagine kind of a neighborhood and how might that look? The tree save is kind of like a cluster, like saving, like a group of trees, as opposed to a single tree. So that was another point of discussion, the idea of the landmark tree. And we can talk about that a little bit more. They were less a fan of that. When you're I think from their perspective, when you're putting together things on the ground, I don't know. Maybe somebody else will speak to that a little bit further, but buffers and tree save areas.
Yeah, go ahead.
And then there was a topography language they used in there as well that I thought was really interesting. So rather than grading everything, there were, again, I think of this amazing topography that was up here around the trees, and it was just, they were level and then put a house there, and the topography was an amazing entrance into the development. So I like not, how much can you change some of those significant topographies? So I don't know that. So I like considering topographies as a part of the equation.
Yeah, I agree with Lynn about the tree save area as opposed to a buffer. And thinking of that same development on the south side there, I drive by there every time I'm on the south side just to remind myself never to let us do that again. But if we would have, understand the developers developing to make money, but if we had to, coerce them into sacrificing 2 or 3 units out of 29 units on a 3-acre parcel, to get a nice stand of trees in the corner. And I don't even think we have any buffers on that property at all. I think they clear cut it right to the corners. But a tree save area, a nice little grove of trees in the back corner or even the front corner would be very aesthetic. I mean, you know, he said himself, trees sell houses, you know, it's like, instead of just
Walk the talk.
yeah, instead of just a bunch of boxes sitting there, you know, you got a nice little grove of trees and, you know, you could enhance the entrance with that. I think that's just something that's much more preferable than requiring, you know, 20-foot buffer of little pine trees and skinny little maples that
And based on
they plant in there.
Commissioner Cooper's recent comment there, here, I just have things that popped in my head. You don't have to answer this. It's a question that doesn't need to be answered. As you had your group discussion with the builders, did you keep in mind they're out to make money and not accommodate the township? You don't have to answer that. I mean, that's the first thing that pops into my mind. They're gonna persuade our commission to accommodate their needs and wants.
I think that that's the balance that we all need to be mindful of, is that there, and I will be a little bit more idealistic because I think that all of us do work not just for the dollar, but to build something, to make something good, you know, to create something. And I think that goes for us and for them as well. They do have a different bottom line than we do, and they do have a different focus. And that a lot of times when we're talking to developers, you know, they're looking at things in a very short time frame, and we'll get frustrated. We'll say, you know, either I or our engineer will say, we're thinking about what this is going to look like in 50 or 75 years. It still has to make sense then, because the infrastructure doesn't go away. The structure of it doesn't go away. So we have different time scales that we're looking at. I think that I always think it's a little bit funny when I find myself in one of these, like standing here or here and talking about a developer's property rights, because I spend most of my time saying, hey, remember the community, when I'm talking to the developer. So both things are true, and they are looking for that bottom line. And we are looking for the build of the community and the aesthetic and what's going to carry on. And somehow those have to work together in a system. So
That's
we're mindful of it. It is. Yeah.
Yeah, we're trying to make sure, I mean, and I'll just speak as the son of a builder. I knew you were thought I was gonna say something. But I can tell you, and my dad didn't build developments like what we're talking about here, but I can tell you, just like any of us that have pride in our work, if a developer creates something based on constraints that they have to look at that for the next 25 years, just like we do. And once the checks are cashed and everybody's paid and everybody's moved into those homes, they still need to look at it. And I think, given the desire to create something that is attractive, that represents our township, that protects as many tree canopies and, you know, respects the neighbors and everything else, they're going to want to do that to the degree they can. But it is a balancing act, and I think the way Vika lays it out is exactly right. You know, there's things that we have to recognize. I mean, there's a need for housing. It's not penultimate in terms of we're going to support everything that wants to be built for any reason because we need housing. That's our job to help guide what that ends up looking like. At the same time, we have to recognize all the masters that builders have to serve. And I think one of the things we heard in our meeting was that a lot of the ordinances that are being developed around this tended to build around canopies. And I know Danny were with us in that, as opposed to individual trees, not eliminating the conversation around buffers, but the fact that it's more about those canopies that have built up over time. And the goal to try to protect those as much as we can. So I'll just throw that out, but it's,
something that I think about, I think it's great we had 2 developers in. And I have a dream, 10 years down the road, we have other developers that are looking at some of our properties. And Dan Levite, Dan's an architect that does small houses. And with small houses and tree canopies and the things that we're talking about, those things could be in harmony so much. And the thing is, I think that we need to have a vision, invite other people into our community, and maybe they become a developer of some of our land into the future, but not. I know we have these two. And I'm not saying anything bad against them, but I think that we need more than that as we start to do more projects in our.
Differentiation.
Yes. And I think as you look at, we've talked a lot about, different types of homes that could be more affordable. Again, we still have the cost of land in Park Township, but that doesn't mean that there could be creative uses of that land to develop smaller homes. And it may not be the same builders that would be interested in doing that. In fact, they probably would. That's other conversations with that. So
In the master plan, I'm sorry, I just lost my train of thought. No. We talked about attainable housing, affordable housing and stuff like that. We also talked about targeting infill areas. And eventually you're going to run out of those. So I think, your dream in 10 years is to, see something. My dream in 10 years is that Park Township is going to be fully developed. Unless you want to start selling off blueberry fields and cutting down a lot more trees, you're going to max out. You're going to saturate it at some point. Park Township's not that big. There's not that much. And one of the things that we talked about was proactively creating an inventory of available properties. And I think we ought to work on that.
Yeah.
And we ought to look at that and even talk to the developers, not about trees, but about what's your 10-year plan? Boscraft, he's got a big development just on the other side of 32nd Street, barely outside of Park Township, but he's not going to stop building. He's a young guy. He's got ambition and evidently the funding and the access to property. But we've got to look at where we want to be. And then, to your point, Lynn, developments with smaller housing and stuff like that. Ask Bauman how many small houses he wants to build. His bottom line is basically a percentage of the cost of the house.
And I did have a conversation with him about smaller houses. He basically said that our zoning ordinances don't allow them to do that in Park Township.
For the most part, right.
So that I need no more details around that.
Right. And that's one thing we looked at or talked about at some of those seminars too, is zoning to allow that or to encourage it. Yeah. Or even if you're going to develop, this is what you're going to develop.
But point it is not changing the road. It's several years ago. We right. Start being very progressive. Yeah. Thinking around.
Yeah, but Bauman, he wants to build $700,000 homes, not $300,000 homes.
Let me spring off that because we keep equating small homes with affordable homes. Those are two different housing types. And there are 4,300 people in Park Township over 65 who are the prime market for those $700,000 small homes. Somebody's going to figure that out. But today we can't build them because we'll fill up all those infill sites and have a bunch of empty land around these small homes because I want a small home, but I got to have this half-acre lot to put it on, right? Because the zoning. It's both of those things. One, I think there's a market for small homes, but there aren't small lots to put them on. Yeah. And that's what those 4,300 people, or some significant portion of them, that want to stay in Park Township are looking for it, and there's nothing to buy.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah, it's size, and it's also, yes, I've mentioned it a few times, right? Like allowing cottage courts, allowing more creativity in what we can include, but thinking about our tree preservation ordinance and what we've got, I like the idea of the tree save area, but absolutely not at the expense of having buffers, especially if we're looking at infill. And it's about finding the right balance between new development in infill areas that is likely to cause a rub with individuals who may already be around it. Change is hard, and finding that balance between, you know, keeping them from not in my backyard to what would be acceptable, and how do we find that balance, and making sure that, you know, depending on the parcel and what is there, you know, that we have the option for buffers where they're appropriate, you know, as to maintain some level of character, for the surrounding, you know, parcels to what is about to be developed. Because it's finding that balance for ourselves as well. While we're promoting infill, it is going to cause some to be upset because they're used to what they've had for however long. And that kind of change is very drastic. And so I think we still need to include options for both in our tree preservation ordinance, because each parcel is going to be different, and we'll have to have some standards built around those to make those decisions as we're looking at the site plans.
Agreed. What did everybody think about, there were a number of things in here around incentives. And it talked about, you know, because I think one of the things we heard was the difficulty, the biggest difficulty I think we heard during our meeting is the perimeter of the property and being able to put buffers there, because they're fighting with utilities, they're fighting with greens, there's a lot of things that are constraining where those things go. What they talked about, and Mika, you mentioned this in your notes, was backyard trees. Being able to create those canopies or trees in the backyard, not necessarily just what you might think of as a buffer, a tree line that's developed, but enough of those trees being built out in the backyard, so it is creating a buffer. It's just different. The other thing we talked about was really, what is a buffer? It can be trees, depending on the property. There could be a combination of trees and fencing. There's a lot of different things. So I think they're looking to us for some clarity, and I used the word before, but predictability, I think, more than anything else. And I asked a question, so I'll stop and see if anybody had any thoughts on some of these incentives that we're talking about. One of them was around reduce yard, and basically, if you do these things, these are the things you can essentially benefit from as a builder. I don't know if you've had a chance to look at those, but they talked about some of the incentives being around density, lot sizes, and so forth.
I thought it was interesting, but it adds a lot of complexity.
It does. Okay.
Like, it kind of felt counterintuitive to making it more simple by adding, even like if we pick the things that we're particularly passionate about, like tree save and a buffer, and still keep it to these are the top areas, right? Again, fundamentally, I'm not opposed. It's just more and more and more layers.
Yeah, the complexity was what I kind of walked away with, and I thought, geez, if we had something this complex, and then we as planning commission are having to look at all of that and make these assessments as these really struggle making some recommendations. So I think the simplicity of it, to your point, is really critical. That helps the developers that we get.
Yeah, in that example, it says the density bonus is calculated as follows. The entire dedicated tree save area in acres multiplied by the maximum residential density number of the underlying zoning district. What does that mean? What does that mean?
If we do that over time.
It's like, what is that?
And what's the step?
So, yeah.
Yeah,
So the complexity is figuring out how to calculate it with their formula.
Yeah.
I had my revelatory moment sometime since that meeting. Well, let me back up. In the meeting, one of the best people that the developers brought with them was a landscape architect from Netterveld, who is the one that actually does all the grunt work to make these landscape plans and listens to me to tell him what species to take out and what's to put in.
Yeah.
But he has the knowledge of how to work with all these different organizations. So he knows how to work on landscape architecture and site plans in Grand Rapids. He does it in Charlotte, North Carolina, but he knows all these townships. And he wasn't there trying to make money other than getting his paycheck. Okay, so I put a lot of validation in what he said. But after I listened to all that, and we talked about tree surveys and DBHs and heritage trees and all, you know, and he was just rejecting everyone out of hand because it is so expensive to pull it off. And what is it going to get you? And then my revelation was Charlotte, North Carolina has a forestry department and a staff. Grand Rapids has a forestry department and a staff. Where's ours? So we're looking at, so that gets back to the complexity word. We can't make some convoluted thing full of formulas and do this, do that, and then negotiate it in these site reviews. We've got to do something simple that gets us what we want and encourages housing and can be accomplished with the staff we have.
You make
Right
it sound so easy.
Well, that's what I've been trying to think about is how to make it easy. And it does take me to the Grand Rapids approach. And hearing that landscape architect talk about what it means to work with Grand Rapids as far as tree preservation. And they are focused on tree canopy. I was very proud to hear him say that. But Grand Rapids will have a prescription for the tree canopy they want in place on any development. And it's a number. It's 25% of the lot, or 25% of the acre, or some places 40%. They have a table. I don't want a table. I just want a number. And I kept thinking about how simple that could be. Is that if you have a piece of property and we want to end up with 25% tree coverage, sometimes you've got to cut trees down to get down to 25%. Sometimes you have to add trees to get up to 25%. But acknowledging that you've got to put in houses and streets and drains and swales and places to stick the water. If you have a number that they have to come in with a plan to discuss, then you can talk about where are the clusters of trees? Does any of these apply to a buffer? I'm voting for getting rid of demanding buffers and do it site by site, because they're going to need those ones where there aren't drains to get up to the percentage of tree canopy we select. But it gives them something simple to come before us. Then we can argue about where the trees should be cut, should not be cut, have to be planted, what trees be planted. But it gets us and them focused on a tree canopy in the plan. And if they bring it and we approve it, then we're done, and they're not running around with their pie tapes. I got one now, by the way, Dave. I really did. I bought one. Pie tape is a tape that at PI, and you go around and it'll tell you what the diameter is by going around the outside. Okay. Yeah, it's a pie tape. Dave's from Michigan Tech. He understands these things.
Good stuff.
But you don't. I says, well, what if we said you only had to measure anything 10 dBH or higher? She says, well, then you have to measure all the 9-inch, 8-inch, and 7-inch to make sure they're not 10-inch. You know, so it doesn't. Making the gradation bigger, and then all you're going to know is, okay, you got these trees at those places, and now what?
Yeah.
And so this simplification process in my mind is debating or analyzing what are percentage tree canopy in any development should be. Acknowledging that sometimes trees are gonna come out and other trees are gonna be put someplace else, so it's gonna take 10 years to get to that canopy, but Grand Rapids has a number on what 1 3-inch DBH tree planted in the yard gets you as far as tree canopy credit, and try to take that simple approach.
One thing I'll add about Grand Rapids, City of Grand Rapids, is they also do that by zoning district. They have a percentage of trees and they have a number of trees and they have a lot of elements that are broken down by zoning district. Again, the gentleman that we had with us in the meeting talked a lot about that, and he felt that it made it, for at least from the City of Grand Rapids perspective, easier. I don't know if it would be for us. I think we'd have to think a little bit more about how all that would be. And again, they've got a forestry staff that can help manage the landscape planning and forest management.
Does the Extension Center offer any kind of forestry consulting? Michigan State.
I don't think that they do. We have called arborists before. We do have some informal advice from our videographer today who had a forestry degree as well. And so we can ask around, but I don't think that's something the extension offers, although I could check.
I'm curious as to whether the county GIS office could tell us what a Park Township's tree canopy percentage is.
That's where we begin.
The map people, you don't want a forester, he's down on the ground under, looking up at the trees. We want somebody looking down from the top.
That's right.
And cause I don't, I think we need to know that to influence what our tree.
Where we want our number to be.
Drones for, right?
Yeah, I mean, it can be done. I don't know if I was telling you that.
That is.
So I wonder about that. So the percentage is gonna be different based on the site. And I think about the development going across from Family Fair, where there are a lot of trees on that property, right? So that's one of those developers that was in Okachee guys. So I'm just gonna make up a number. So what if that was 65% of this development, or what we want to develop is covered with trees? They just go, well, then you don't want to say, well, you only need 25%, so you can take all of this out. So what are you beginning with? And there are gonna be other sites where there's hardly anything, so.
Right, and so you've got a plan, like Foxglove.
Yeah, yes.
What's your plan to in 10 years, whatever the number is, for there to be 25%, 40% tree canopy
Right.
covered in Foxglove? What's your plan?
So it's kind of, what do you have? And then here where we want the site to go long term. And you can accomplish that through A, B, and C, through tree canopies and buffers and something else. I mean, you can, so it's kind of putting a simple formula together, what you look at first. And then whatever you have and what you want it to be, then you can make that percentage up by doing these three things together. If that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of jumping off of that, they're kind of the direction that our tree ordinance goes is we call it a tree preservation ordinance. A lot of places just call it a tree ordinance. We're looking at places that have lots of trees. We're trying to keep lots of trees. So similar to what you're saying, what do you think relatively of approaching parcels as, and I think Dan may have been saying this too, we want to see 40% on this parcel. So if you don't have a lot of trees, you can add those. I'm trying to think how to say this in a way that makes sense outside my own head. Evenness between whether it's a currently heavily forested parcel or a currently vacant parcel. So you can kind of approach it in two different ways, whether it's you're trying to keep as many trees on the parcel that has a lot of trees, or whether you're trying to add more to the one that doesn't, or you can just say, right, so then that's basing decisions on what is currently on the parcel, or just saying, we're not even going to look at what's there right now. We just want to see a percentage of trees.
Well, you start with a target of 25% or more. Now, because in that meeting, one of them said, we don't cut down trees just to cut down trees, because it's expensive.
Mhm.
They're right, it's expensive to cut down trees. But we've got to, but we are also there to build houses in order to make money, which is what we want them to do. So I think let's say our target is 25%. We have a property that after they put in their roads and the houses and the yards, the amenities, they're still left with 40%. Well, we're not telling them, and they're not going to cut down 15% of the trees to get down to 25% just because the tree ordinance tells them they have to. That's a lot of money that doesn't gain them anything. So if our percentage is a minimum, maximum is whatever they want it to be. But if it falls below that, then they have to start planting.
Go ahead.
So if I follow your example, I like that. So let's just say the target's 25% and there are some tree stands that are in there, right? And so, and we want them to honor those tree stands. And by the way, those tree stands might be right in the way of where they might put the house, right? So that might be, well, we want 25% be the target, but you have these three significant tree stands that we want to try to work with. And by saving those, then maybe the buffer becomes smaller around the outside edge. It's almost like tree stands are important as a part of that 25%. So you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Did that make sense?
Yes. And I'd say if you're gonna have a 10-acre parcel and you want 25% tree canopy, you're gonna be leaving some tree stands. And I keep using 25%. I'm not recommending it. I don't know what the number should be.
Yeah.
I know it's not 100%. I know it's not 0. I don't know, someplace in between. But if we could figure out what 25% looks like from above and what 40% looks like from above and what 80% looks like, I think then we could start to zero in on what that number should be, or go meet with the forester at Grand Rapids and say, how'd you come up with this table?
So the way I'm hearing this is by default, we're getting to what we've talked about, which is, wouldn't it be cool if we could get developers to think about the design of the layout and where trees are and the landscape plan up front? We're not forcing them to do that, but by using a percentage, they've got to start thinking about where those trees are going to go. How many do we have that are in place that are great trees, canopies that are in place that we want to try to maintain? And it's probably going to infuse some creativity in their plan, because they're going to have to start if they start by thinking of that, it's going to give them a lot more flexibility on how they build and develop. I think. I mean, this is conjecture, but it seems to make a lot of sense. I don't know about the zoning piece though. And we can maybe talk more about that as far as whether it should be done by zone. I mean, PUD has its own.
I actually think it makes a lot of sense to do kind of by zoning district, just when you're thinking about density. If you have an R5, if we have it zoned as R5, then we've identified that as an area where this is where we want to create housing for people. We want to make sure that they have the flexibility to actually put that housing on that site and figure out how to make that work so it still feels good, still feels right. If you have an R1, so, I keep calling it the wrong name, so I'm not going to try to say it. The one we just did on the northwest corner of 160th and James. If you have something like that, then you've got a lot more space that you can keep trees in. So in your infrastructure takes up a smaller percentage and things like that. So I think there's something to that.
Percentage too helps.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's an interesting approach, but it does sound like it's simplifying a lot of the things.
Now, are these all planned unit developments?
I think the tree preservation ordinance as is written is anything that comes before the planning commission. Yeah, so that includes, we don't really see many of these, but that would include just like a commercial site plan that would also be under this. It applied differently, of course, but
something in box trees. And I know we're probably thinking PEDs for us, but if there are landmark trees, and think of Maryland Woods, for example, you know, where there that existing, even with those type of trees, whatever we write, is there gonna be something that to existing?
I think that's a good thing for you to talk about. How you want to handle existing trees, and we talked about landmark trees a little bit, and I think that was, and Dan can chime in. I think that was where the developers were probably the most reluctant. There are ordinances that require you to replace trees of a certain size, calculated by DBH. So, if you have a DBH of, I don't know, it's a huge tree and you've got a DBH of 80 or something like that, then you have to replace that 80 inches. You have to replace that caliper. So I think that's a good thing to talk about. I think the trick comes with, with all the different pieces that people are trying to put together, how you incorporate that. And I'd like to hear, what your thoughts are on that, as far as, is that something that you get some kind of credit for, or something along those lines. One of the other things to mention kind of in connection was we talked about how you look at existing tree cover. And, we've talked about that quite a bit. When I look at the ordinances, there are an awful lot of places that are, you do a tree survey, but those are a lot of urban places. And so one of the points that they made was, if we said we're going to do a tree survey of a 20-acre site and it's heavily wooded, that could be $10,000. It's a lot of money just to.
No, they said 100,000.
It's also $100,000.
Some large.
I want to check that number. A lot of money though. Yeah, so.
50, 100.
Yeah, so I mean, get some quotes on that to find out, maybe just to be knowledgeable, what are we talking about if we talk about a tree survey? Then the other alternative is looking at it more as that, as Dan has talked about, a little bit more of a canopy-based system. So there are a couple of different ways of handling that. And I just mentioned that because we're talking about DBH and surveying, you talk about a landmark tree. So, yeah.
I would be concerned about the cost of a tree survey at all. I know the developers are, but
You're good.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, cost them 20,000, 30,000. I don't care. I mean, look what they're going to sell the lots for, and look what they're going to sell the houses for. I mean, our responsibility is to the township, not to the developers.
They do with the information, once they deliver it to you.
There's a purpose for it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you can reconfigure lots. You can say, okay, I can save these trees if I make this thing odd shaped and, allow a building area.
That's the conversation we want.
It takes a little bit more upfront analysis on it. But as far as the cost of developing, I mean, those guys spend money like crazy. The development that Boscraft is doing south of 32nd Street, there's a lot of big heavy equipment sitting out there right now. That's a lot of money. So another $20,000 or $40,000.
Okay.
Is
It's
there,
like we've got to answer to the township, not to their balance sheet.
is there a way to find out what our tree coverage is? Is there an agency that we can go to, say, in Park Township, any neighboring ones, how do we compare to others, and what do we really want it to be?
Yes, I don't know, like, who to call and how to go about that, but that is something that can be done. It is a drone thing. It's a map-based thing. So we were just talking about, if our GIS person is able to do that just based on existing visualization, or if it requires different imaging, I don't know, but yeah. It would probably, we wouldn't be able to do that next month. It would be it'd be a longer process. I don't know what the lead time would be, but I think we could look into that. That would be pretty interesting.
Use on trees versus no use on trees, I think it matters what time.
Yeah, I don't think we could send a drone out right now.
I think getting that information, I would like to see it by zoning district as well, too. I mean, once we have it, we can break it down, but we'd have to overlay it with our map.
Yeah, you got the phone. But that's just existing. That's a baseline. That's where we are.
It is, but I mean, right? If we're trying to establish what our minimum should be, it should be roughly, in my opinion, equivalent to the average of the zoning district. If we're saying we like what we've got in the township, instead of just randomly pulling a number.
Take into consideration, you have areas that are 100% forested right now.
And
then you have
100%
ag, that's 50%.
Right,
So.
right. Well, but that's why
Don't look,
over,
don't look to the north. part of
well,
the
also
township.
overlaying it with the zoning districts too, to understand, right?
Right.
Like, because we have some that have the future land use that would be rezoned to be developed.
You could come up with a baseline for each.
Yeah.
Zoning district. Yeah,
Yep. That was kind of where I was going with it.
I got there.
I gotta get the words out eventually.
One of the things that I liked, and I just wanted to throw this out and see if you guys had any thoughts on it. The city of Grand Rapids had something called administrative departures in each of their elements of their plan. And basically what it was, I mean, I don't think we don't want to provide a lot of outs. But as an example, in a case where there was a slope that was too significant and they couldn't build on it the way the ordinance wrote that it needed to be, they had what they call administrative departures, which essentially says, okay, we understand you can't do this because of a specific element that's rational and truthful, but they had very specific reasons why you would be able to have one of those, right? I don't know if we'll need those if we can keep this very simple, but I'm sure things are going to come up. Like we've heard the drainage swales being a big issue. If we go to a percentage, maybe that's not an issue anymore, right? Maybe we don't have a lot of scenarios where we need that type of an out, if you will, or a jail-free card, right? Yeah. Because you've got something you physically can't build or you can't meet the requirements for. But I just thought it was interesting, but the thing that I liked about it is they were very specific about the things that would allow you to be able to get one of those different situations. So I don't know. Administrative departures. Well, they've got a big administrative base in Grand Rapids and a forestry staff, as we talked about. So, what do you think? Do we want to provide some additional input? Other things we want to talk about? Do you have enough to?
No, I'm happy with what I've heard. I think I'd love to hear if there's anything else burning on anyone's mind. I think what I'm going to try to do for next time is to come up. I don't know if it'll quite be to the ordinance stage yet, but come up with some of that language. I want to come up with some specific language around particularly buffers and tree save areas and some of that interaction. So maybe more than that too, but that's kind of the direction that I'm thinking of heading so that you can start getting your eyes on some actual language and then moving from there.
I also did like the species that they had some of the charts.
Okay.
Yeah.
I like that too.
No, they had the invasive chart. They had the red. I like. What did you think? Yeah, I'll ask you because you've got more tree experience than I do for sure. The one that they had next to water sources, they had a list of trees that made sense if they were going to be near water, and I thought that was.
Was one of them.
Yeah.
There was some
Yellow cottonwoods, things that thrive with their feet wet, is the crop.
Okay.
And die if their feet aren't wet.
Right.
Yeah.
I hadn't seen that in any of the others that we looked at. I thought it was pretty interesting. So.
I did make sure the landscape architect knew about that new MSU extension. Was it MSU extension to put out or DNR?
I think it might have been DNR.
The one that we had in the last meeting. And he didn't seem like he did or didn't know about it. He's very good at being stone faced.
Yeah.
But we said we'd like them to use that.
It was very prescriptive and it covered just about everything you could think of in terms of something like that. So, or landscape planning in general. So, good. Anything else, folks? Any other things you want to get out of the table?
No, you're clean.
No.
Yeah, I just have one more kind of a general question. So we talked about 25% as, or whatever number it is. 40, sure. Whatever the number is. So this development that Bowman's doing on 160th and James Street, it's cornfield. It's got zero.
Right.
So if he would come to us in a year, would we make him put 25% canopy on that piece of property? I mean, add all those trees?
Sounds like it.
I say, yeah.
That's our vision for our township.
Okay, I'm just asking what everybody else thinks. I mean, I would say not. And again, I mean, I'm not pro developer and I could care less about their costs. But you put in a bunch of 3-inch trees or 2-inch trees or whatever, and you get didn't they said they had like a canopy credit. Each one has so many square feet, so you compare that to the overall site. You can put in hundreds of trees in there, and then as they grow, does the canopy? Well, I'm not so sure either, but that's just what's pondering in my mind.
900 square feet of credit.
Okay, so they're talking future canopy.
Right.
Future, okay, that's what I wanted to know because, yeah. So you plant 25% and in 6 years you got,
Oh, no, well, because
60%.
you have to think about the health of the trees, right? Like you wouldn't want to plant them that dense or,
Right.
yeah.
That's right. That's where I was going. Okay, I just needed some help thinking through that. All right, great. Thank you.
But
Yes, add trees. No, not that many.
instead of having trees, I guess where I was going was we've approved it with our existing tree.
Well, that one, I was just using that as an example. That came to us after we worked through this.
Yeah.
For the next one, and
I think it would be.
we got that piece of it's over on 32nd Street that Boscraft wants to do too. I mean, he preserved every tree on that site.
Right.
All 4 of them for next one. So I mean, he's got 100%, right?
Yeah, exactly. All right.
And then
Go
if
ahead.
you wanted to put in an acre of trees using the 900 square feet, you'd be putting in 48 trees.
Yes. But if you have a 20-acre parcel and you've got a forest, 5 acres of it.
20-acre cornfield that you wanna.
Yeah. And you've got to do 5 acres of it.
Times 20.
That's not.
960, yeah.
Well, then you've got a nursery, not a housing development.
Yeah, where are the houses? That looked like the one I had in St. Louis.
The other thought I have is does everybody want trees in their yard? So the reason I asked this question is I lived in Wakazu Woods for over 20 years.
Okay.
Beautiful trees. I had a big white oak tree in my front yard, still there. Just a beautiful tree. And then there was a big beech tree over a little ways. I spent 6 weeks in the fall cleaning up leaves. Right now I have 2 little ornamental trees in my front yard, which are getting bigger and they're dropping leaves. But I mean, my wife wants to put a big tree in the backyard and I said, that's fine. It'll drop leaves in 20 years when I'll be gone. But not everybody, wants trees.
Then they don't have to buy a house in the township.
Imagine that. I've got huge white oaks. Yeah, just huge, 200-year-old trees.
That's what I had, yeah.
I love it.
Beautiful tree.
I mean, when we think about the character of the township, just saying, the trees are definitely a part of it. So you're going to attract individuals who enjoy that amenity of the township. So leaves are inherently a part of that.
Let's get conifers.
Well, they have their own issues, but.
I think we heard during our meeting that somebody had said that one of the adjacent homeowners did not want the trees put up. Because they liked having the openness in their backyard, and they didn't want trees any more than what they already had. So anyway, I think that would be less for us to worry about in this case, I think.
Yeah.
And probably not as inherent as wanting the trees there.
So how do you feel about requiring street trees and plants and have them come towards your
Great question.
tree canopy? At 93 square feet of credit for everyone they plant from the front yard. There you go. So.
It's part of their lot. If we're telling them that 25%, that you're talking about in the island to the right of
in our ordinance requiring street trees being not up on the other side
Okay.
right away. Would we want to require street trees?
I think we currently do. I'd have to go back and look at exactly what it is, but we do currently require planting for new developments.
And should we count them towards it?
I think we should.
I would think so.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah, it seems fair.
Otherwise, we'll get to your scenario where we're 100% covered.
Where's the house?
And then you'll start a tree commission, take care of the
You got too many trees.
voluntarily.
70 trees. It's like fitting the deer herd. All right. We good? All right. Thanks, everybody. Good conversation as always on this. I have a strong feeling we're gonna end up with something really good. So thanks for all the time and everybody on this. All right, member and staff reports. Anything happening with the board, Char?
I took the page. There's lots of stuff going on. I'm gonna kind of go backwards because that's the way my memory was going. I was like, okay, what happened latest, and then probably dig that deeper. So on Saturday, the entire board, as well as the majority of our staff, interviewed 2 candidates for the manager position. Both candidates were phenomenal, and we could have flipped a coin and been happy with either one of them. It was extremely hard to make a decision. The board elected to have a committee because not everybody has time. We received over 140 applications for the position, and that was a lot to go to. So like I said, you guys can do that. They narrowed it down to 5, and then they narrowed it down to the top 2 of the 5 to bring in to interview. So we chose a first place candidate and an alternate. With the first place candidate, there's background checks and whatever else, negotiations with compensations and stuff like that. If it doesn't pan out, then the position will be offered to the second individual. But
the new background first.
we have extended the desire for Mr. Matt Butts. He is the current assistant city manager of Grandville. He's been there almost 20 years. So he's got quite the background. The alternate is Allison Nugent, and she's currently the Caledonia Charter Township manager. She's been in that role for about 2.5 years. And prior to that, she did stuff down in Texas. Lots of conversation. We opted to go with an individual who had longer tenure in a position. And I think that's mainly, it was that or flipping a coin. I mean, they were both absolutely phenomenal. So with regard to negotiations, I don't know where that stands. Saturday, they both got a phone call from Manager Cousins, and by Monday, this past Monday, we're supposed to start negotiations and conversations and compensation and stuff like that. So I haven't gotten an update yet. I don't know where it resides, but I'm certain that's coming soon. Absolutely. And granted, you put a job posting out on LinkedIn and Indeed, and if it just says manager, you get all kinds of people applying. before the committee was formed, we defined the criteria that the committee was supposed to look for. And we did say they had to have an educational background, they needed municipal experience, and there was another of other items, and that's how they started whittling down the 140 plus candidates. Yeah, they did a phenomenal job. The committee was Bill Cousins, Steve Spolhoff, Jim Gerard, and Brian Jones.
Good committee.
Yeah, they're different. They come from all different aspects, but they had our criteria from the whole board of what they wanted, what we wanted to make sure we accomplished with the new manager and their role for us. So I'm extremely excited. Yes. Prior to that, our working session on the 15th was held at the Mottman Center. We try to take a couple of meetings a year and have it on the south side if anybody wants to attend from the south side. That meeting, because it was a working meeting, there's no discussion or decisions made. We did look over some brainstorming concepts of improvements to building because it needs improvements. It was built in the 70s and it looks like it. And if retro is somebody's thing, they'd love it, but it needs improvements. Yeah, so the board did give the go ahead to work with a structural architect and an interior designer, list what repairs need to be, and we know it needs a new roof and things like that. So they'll come back to the board and say, this is after our investigation, what's needed, this is what it's gonna cost, what do you guys wanna work on? And I'm hopeful for that too. There was, everything's visual with regard to pictures and dreaming what it could look like, the space could look like, and there was some really pretty cool concepts. So excited for that as well. At that meeting, we also reviewed our past 2025 strategic plan. And then we kind of went through with a revision on what we want to concentrate on 2026, and it's kind of all in flux, but more to come on that. Back on the 8th was our regular monthly meeting. It was busy. So the Point West PUD was finally approved. And so that's off of our plate. The Foxglove PUD was not approved. That was a 2-5 vote against. Again, there was residents, just like they came to our meeting, lots of residents, lots of concern about safety and configuration. And there were several board members who also had those same concerns and didn't feel right about passing it through. Even though it was approved by our planning commission. So they'll be back on our agenda next month again for a little bit more conversation and probably approval at that point. Trustees agenda, but yeah, it's not here at the planning commission. Yeah, trustees have to get their act together. And understanding. No, it'll just be discussion on the board, yeah.
That was the public hearing, right?
Yeah.
Here we had a public hearing.
There is a public hearing at the board meeting as well.
Hearing at the board.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, we broke it up, it was kind of weird. Like we had back to back to back, we had 3 public hearings. And then we went to the PDs and then discussed and approved or didn't approve. I'm like, I don't know why Steve laid it out that way, but that's how he chose to drive it.
Okay.
So that's why I didn't remember the book. They were up separate. The last item, Stablewood PUD, was also discussed and that was approved. The only other agenda item was a community member came forward with a proposal, just wanted to test the waters and see what we thought for a rainbow bridge. His other communities have it. It is just a small, as he built it out to us, a small, quiet, reflecting area where you can, it's to respect your pets. You can put your dog collar on the fence or their dog tag or he had the Rainbow Bridge poem, if you're even familiar with that, you know, placard to have that there. Totally funded by private donations and built by Boy Scouts. So we told them, yeah, investigate it and see what you come up with. There's a piece of Ottawa County property that is not buildable. It's a small little narrow sliver that actually comes off south of Ottawa Beach Road, going south on 168th. There's a crosswalk there and just a bunch of shrubs.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Okay, got it.
Yes.
So
I'm like, wait, did I misspeak?
it's not much south of.
There's not, and it's just a small little area, and yeah, we told them to see if that would, and if that doesn't work out, then Cooper Van Weir Park somewhere. That was it.
For those of you who don't know what Rainbow Bridge is, that's the place where when you pass away, your dogs, they're waiting.
Waiting.
Pass, they're waiting for you to cross to the other side.
And that's part of what that poem placard really. That's the belief. And to provide something for everybody in our township, I just thought it was a very good idea to investigate them to incorporate that to our community. Last thing I have, I signed up for a conference in April. And I signed up for an 8-hour class. I do this. On defining your township's future land use. It's a break, it's like at the day before the conference even starts, so I'll have to go a day early. Actually, the Steve Spoonhoff is gonna go to that session as well. But I just thought that would be very educational. So that's what.
Is that Michigan Planners or is that?
The MTA,
MTA Township?
yes,
Okay.
Township Association Conference will be up north.
That's it, and I bet a lot of those, there's a lot of road in the spring. As far as whether
There
sessions,
is,
conferences, and typically there's a lot of road.
that's the end of my report. It was like, sorry.
Hey, can I ask a process question? Because I watched that meeting, what? Does some kind of communication go to Mike Oscraft on the whys? And what could be different, or because I saw him just get up, steam out of the building. But what happens as far as Mike in any communications from the township at all else?
I don't know.
How's this work?
I'm certain it's going back in Grace. There was opportunity, there was discussion, yeah, got but,
Yeah, he left after the vote.
right,
Yeah.
but you're not laughing, so he wasn't storming out.
Oh, well,
Yeah.
The son was laughing, so
yeah,
I don't know what that was about.
but what is the township's communication process? Somebody
Doesn't get passed. at the-
doesn't get passed, and there was no discussion about it. It was just sort of took the vote, right?
There was-
a public hearing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there was minimal discussion, it's pretty much how things happen in court.
It's
That's one of the things that we'll be talking about a little bit more is how, we'll be talking about that a little bit more. I called Mike on Monday. I emailed him the next day, just said, hey, can we talk Monday? And we talked Monday. So if it passes, we may or may not be in communication afterwards because these guys have done this a lot, so they kind of know. But yeah, if it's voted down or if there's other stuff that comes up, then yeah, I call them and say, all right, this is what's going on. This is what we're talking about. What are you thinking right now? This is kind of the conversations we're having right now, and then we just kind of work forward from there.
But definitely knew that there was still safety concern that existed.
Well, we're the safety concerns, we have the fire chief here, he fully endorsed that back entry.
Yeah, but then.
That's his preference, and I would think as far as safety, that's gotta take precedence over just about anything else.
I don't necessarily know if that was his preference. I just.
Said it was. You wanted the second, safety, having the second entrance provides additional access.
It does, in case of like a falling tree or something like that. Yeah, I don't know if there was a conversation on, instead of paving a road, just having the grass access.
See, that's what I thought all along the middle, where they had that community center, you could swing that thing from towards the end. You could have a gravel road that is just strictly, and it says for emergency vehicles, and then cars are not going through that. I mean, they could have done something much different.
It's really tricky to go back and say, that they could have done this or this or this, not for a lot of different reasons. Like we've talked about all the different pieces that they're working together, and that's part of it. We did talk and they did talk. There's a lot of talking about that possible emergency exit. So you could do the second entrance as like the pervious surface where it's just a drivable grass. You could do that, but you then have to, because that's not actually that works for emergencies, but it doesn't work for access. You then have to put another cul-de-sac in there at that end because your Amazon truck needs to be able to turn around there. So that affects what the layout is of the parcels that you're able to set up there. So there's always lots of different ways to put things together, but that is where you start talking about you have access on a public street. If we as a government entity say you now no longer have access to that public street, we kind of get ourselves into some hot water with that because that's something that kind of comes with the property.
To me, even for the first time, I saw an opportunity, but that's not really our role is to tell them that here's another way to do that. But I kept seeing that there were better ways to do that. Put in the cul-de-sac in. I don't think it would be that hard to do, but that's where you really expect a developer to have some creativity to solve those bills. And it just didn't really feel like, with all the feedback, that it was really coming to it. So what was the easy concern?
Traffic and which way it's predicted to go and going through a street that is basically the same size as the one that's on the west side of the park here, that it's extremely narrow, gutters on both sides, there's no room. If there's a car parked, an ambulance isn't gonna get there.
Sidewalks for people.
There's no sidewalks. So I do want to say the board totally trusts the planning commission 100%. And when we flush everything out and go forward with our decision to recommend to them, they want to listen. But even coming out of that meeting, one individual was, something didn't sit right. I can't put my finger on it, but something didn't sit right, and that's why I had to vote no at this time. So lots of conversations, so maybe more conversations will be had and different points of view, and maybe they'll present something different, but we'll have it at the board meeting.
I have a lot of comments I can make, but I won't. So I'm gonna leave it there. Yeah. All right. Thanks, Sharon. Any other things you want to cover or? ZBA? Yep, ZBA. We'll go. I just want to make sure we get.
All my years on the ZBA, this was a very unique meeting.
Pray tell.
We heard a request from for an appeal of a decision by the zoning administrator regarding an unimproved lot up in Macataw Park. And of course, it's a dune that has elevations. It's a moving dune because you're right up off the water. And the issue was because a certain abutment was made by a prior lot owner that infringed on this little lot, that was an improvement to this little lot. And so we went back and forth, and two of the members of the Zoning Board of Appeals had difficulty understanding why the applicant position wasn't appropriate. And fortunately, our attorney advised that the staff could provide some additional information that would help them come to a resolution. So we tabled the decision until such time as we get this additional information. But in my humble opinion, I don't think that Eagle would even touch this lot for any kind of development because of its situation up there and to hold that dune. But again, they haven't made that decision yet, and hopefully they won't have to.
Well, very interesting.
Pardon?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, I'd better not say anymore.
And if you think that sounds like fun, Dennis, unfortunately, is going to be retiring this calendar year from both the Planning Commission and the ZBA
Yes.
from term limits. So if any of you are interested in that Planning Commission position on the Zoning Board of Appeals, it's not always quite as much fun as that one. I didn't think that one was really fun. That was really interesting. It's a good conversation. But if you're interested, we'll be looking for somebody. Important role.
If you've got any recommendations or any folks you know that might be interested, let us know too. Okay.
In terms of the commission
ZBA.
serving on ZBA,
Both. But certainly on the ZBA side.
I think that this gentleman to my right has the personality and the ability to differentiate between positions that he would be very effective.
So let me know if you want more meetings on your schedule in the evening. Okay, all right. We'll talk. Some time to get to the side exit.
Till then, yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah. But we will also have a planning commission, commissioner spot opening at the same time. So the good news is we did have a really great, base of folks that were interested when Dan came on. So we have, I think, a number of folks that would be good candidates, but we'll open it up as well. Cool. Let's see.
All right, so said.
Yes. All right. Anything else? Any old business? Any other? I don't think we have any other reports, right?
We're still being sued, so. We're still being sued. No, the federal, short-term rental owners, 70 of them now, their numbers have been declining, filed a federal lawsuit, a lawsuit in federal court. I just got the message that we got our insurance defense counsel on that. They are seeking damages for this one, so we have an insurance defense, which is nice. That just means that the insurance company pays for it, which is nice. Dan is great, but it's nice to have somebody else pocket that. Mm-hmm. So the crux of their lawsuit is they're asserting unconstitutional vagueness in our ordinance to not know that short-term rentals weren't permitted. So that was something that in the appeal, that the lawsuit that was already settled by Judge Hulsing, he shut down pretty clearly, like it's, and so we'll see. They're still going to go, so that's a different chain of courts, and so they're filing this as a constitutional claim now, as opposed to just kind of a regular one in the circuit and appeals court. So they still have that case that's headed up in the appeals court, and now they have this one in the federal court as well. So,
okay,
gift that keeps on giving.
Yes, it is. It is.
Well, I'm hoping that we can come up with terminology that encompasses hotel, motel, Holiday Inn.
Yeah.
Just- And whatever future term comes up, that it can all be defined.
Yeah. No, I think it's
And it's why I don't want there to be any interpretation, like.
All right. I think that brings us to an opportunity to close. I'd love to hear a motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Thanks, everybody.